Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear student teachers, I am Rashid Salim with lecture number 25 of Functional English 1. Lecture number 25 is going to be about weather. We will talk about weather in lecture number 25. But before we start talking about weather, let's have a quick review of lecture number 24. In lecture number 24, we learned how to identify various kinds of reports. And we learned that there are so many different kinds of reports that we can write. And in particular, we learned about short reports. And we identified various kinds of reports. If you can recall, we looked at bank report, we looked at financial report, medical report, legal report, assessment report, news report, weather report, book report, review report, error report, event report, project report, progress report. So you know there are so many different kinds of reports out there. The purpose of report writing is to record, to inform, and to help the decision makers. And we found out that we can classify all these into 4 different kinds of reports. So there are, you might call them problem report, there are project reports, there are investigative reports, and there are event reports. Okay, we also analyzed a short report for its elements so that we can produce a similar kind of report. We learned lots of guidelines and we planned how to write a short report, and finally you are ready to write your own short report. In planning, the most important crucial keyword was map. M for message, A for audience, and P for purpose. And the most important point that I made was that instead of writing your reports for examination purposes, you should write it for real audience, real messages, and real purposes. And only then your report will be effective. So this is what we learned in lecture number 24. We move on and look at the objectives of lecture number 25. After completing lecture number 25, you should be able to listen to and comprehend weather reports. You will be able to use weather-related words and phrases. You will be able to use comparative and superlative degrees of adjectives. And you learn how to use will for forecasts and predictions. And finally, you will be able to ask about and describe weather in your own words. So basically, in lecture number 25, we are going to talk about weather, we are going to understand and comprehend weather forecasts, we are going to analyze weather forecasts, and finally, we are going to give our own weather reports. Okay, so let's first talk about the essential vocabulary which is required when we talk about weather. Alright, sorry, before even the essential vocabulary, let me ask you few questions that are that we should start with. Okay, the first question is, what's the weather like today? What's the weather like today? Today it's hot. The minimum temperature is probably 28 and the maximum temperature is 42. It's a little windy today, but it is hot and it is sunny. How about the weather in your city? What's the weather like today? Okay, now we can ask the same question in the past as well. So we can say, what was the weather like yesterday? I want you to pay attention to this format. What's the weather like? What was the weather like? What was the weather like yesterday? Well, yesterday it was really very hot in the morning, but in the afternoon there was a windstorm, and there was a little shower in scattered places, and the temperature it fell down, and we had quite cool evening. How about the weather where you live? What was the weather like yesterday? And similarly, you can ask about making predictions or future. In your opinion, what will the weather be like tomorrow? Well, in my opinion, the weather it'll rain tomorrow, and it'll be windy tomorrow. Okay, the next question I'm going to ask you is, what's the difference between weather, season, and climate? Yeah, very often these three words are used synonymously, but you should be clear as far as the difference between these three terms is concerned. Unfortunately, in Urdu we have the same word for weather and season. दोनों को उर्दू में हम मौसम ही कहते हैं. Whereas for climate, we have the word abo hawa. Whereas for weather and season, we use the same word mosam. So what's the difference between weather and season and climate? Yes, you are right. Weather is the state of weather is only for a short period of time. It changes even within a day. So it changes day to day. Whereas season is state of weather over a longer stretch of time, over a longer period of time, probably months. So you have 4 or 5 seasons in a year. Whereas climate is much longer and broader term, and it spans over years or sometimes even centuries or decades. For example, we can talk about the climate of tropical area. Okay. We can talk about the climate of coastal area. So this climate hardly ever changes. Its features are pretty much permanent, and if they change, they only change over centuries, or they change over decades or over years. Like when we talk about global warming, we are not talking about the weather, we are talking about the climate change. Because this change, 1 degree centigrade difference, is over a long period of time. It is over decades or over centuries. You can't actually realize it from year to year perspective. Okay, so now I hope you understand the difference between weather, season, and climate. You do? Very good. Okay, the next question is, do you listen to weather reports and forecasts in English? I'm sure that you listen to it in Urdu and probably in your local languages, but do you listen to weather reports and forecasts in English? Maybe sometimes you do, but do you ever pay attention to it when they are on? And the next question is, how much do you understand these weather reports? 10%, 20%, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80%, or 100%? I know there are some particular vocabulary, specialized vocabulary, that is not easy to understand, and that's why I have included a complete lecture on talking about weather. So After completing today's lecture, you should actually be able to understand a lot of vocabulary which is relevant in about weather, and it should help you understand these weather forecasts and reports easily. Okay, now we move on and we look at some common vocabulary items that are associated with weather. Now if you look at these pictures here, you look at the picture of a sun. Usually this is the weather symbol which is used in weather maps or weather charts. So it's the sun. When the sun is out, we say it is a sunny day or it is sunny. What's the weather like today? It is sunny. What's the weather like today? It is sunny. Okay, what was the weather like yesterday? It was cloudy. All right. This one is partly cloudy or partially cloudy. And if you have little drops of water underneath this cloud, you call it rainy. Rainy. And if instead of these drops of water you have little stars, shining stars, we say it is snowing or it is snowy, from the word snow. So you have sunny from sun, cloudy from cloud, rainy from rain, snowy from snow, and sleeting. What is sleet? If you look at these two pictures, here you have some drops of water and you also have some what you call them, flakes, snowflakes. So you have these snowflakes and rain mixed together. So what is sleet? Sleet is mixture of snow and rain. Sometimes if you live in cold areas, sometimes when it snows, there is a mixture of rain and snow. That is called sleet. And you say it is sleeting. What's the weather like today? It's sleeting. Or it has been sleeting for an hour. Okay, and if along with these drops of water you have this electric signal, this symbol for electricity, we call it storm. It's a rainstorm. There could be different kinds of storms. There could be windstorm, there could be rainstorm, and there could be sea storm. If it is in the sea, it is called sea storm. If it is in the desert, we call it desert storm. If it is in the plains, we can call it wind storm. Or if it is along with the rain, we call it rainstorm. So there are different kinds of storms. Then you have lightning, and usually you have this thunder and lightning. They go together. Thunder is the sound that it makes, and lightning is the visualization. Okay, then you have these small soft stone, not soft really, sometimes they may be really hard. These are hard stones. They are called hails, or you also call them hailstones, and it is hailing. ठीक है, उर्दू में इसको हम कहते हैं ओले पड़ना, right? So these are like small ice stones or snow stones that fall, and we call them hails. Okay, if a cloud is blowing wind, it is called windy. And if there are these vertical lines here, this is called fog or foggy. Fog or foggy actually means reduces visibility. So if it is foggy, normally your visibility is reduced and you can't see beyond few feet or sometimes few meters. Then you have ice, and from ice you have icy. You have tornado. Tornado is just like a twister. If it is really very powerful and if it is huge and big, you call it a tornado, or you call it a twister. Okay, because it whirls and whirls around, and it is really very powerful. If it is not really very powerful and the wind is moving in circular fashion, it is called the whirlwind. Whirlwind, जिसको हम जो है बाद गर्द कहते हैं उर्दू में, गर्द बाद कहते हैं, और बगुला भी कहते हैं, गर्द बाद और बगुला. अगर पानी में हो तो हम इसको जो है भंवर कहते हैं या गर्दाब कहते हैं. इंग्लिश में हम इसको वर्लपूल कहते हैं, वर्लपूल, whirlwind, whirlpool. But here this one is really very powerful, and this tornado could be really many meters high, and sometimes it can pluck the roofs of the houses. So this is really very destructive. Tornado is the same as hurricane, right? Okay, this one is a rainbow, you all know that, and this is a clear sky. You can look at the moon, there are no clouds, there is no fog, no mist, and it is a clear sky. And then the last four images are about temperature: hot, warm, cold, and freezing. Okay? And sometimes the temperature could also be cool. So cool is comfortable, warm is comfortable, but hot and cold are uncomfortable, whereas freezing is really very uncomfortable. And hot could be scorching hot. As जी वापस आते हैं और scorching hot से दोबारा शुरू करते हैं. And it could be scorching hot, as in Pakistan in summer it is really very hot. Temperature sometimes goes above 40, and in some areas in Pakistan it goes even above 50. Well, it is really terrible when it happens. Okay, so these are some symbols, weather symbols, that are often used. I want to look at few more, and if you look at it in detail, rain could be, earlier we talked about rainy, but rain could be of different kinds. So there could be a drizzle. Drizzle, जिसको उर्दू में हम बूंदाबांदी कहते हैं, so it's very light rain, not heavy. Showers is sudden rain, and it is like a burst of rain and it suddenly stops. You know, in the rainy season particularly, sometimes you see that the sky is clear and suddenly there comes a shower, and after very few moments it is over. Okay, downpour is really very heavy rain, and if it continues for hours and hours, we call it torrential rain. So torrential rain is if it continues for days or hours. Otherwise, if it is really very heavy rain, we call it a downpour. So we say it was quite a downpour today, or it is quite a downpour today. Or we can say we had some showers this morning, we had some showers last night, it is drizzling outside. Okay, and we can have flood. I don't need to explain it. I think usually lots of cities in Pakistan are flooded after the rainy season, after the monsoon. Okay, similarly for cold, we use the word hail or hailstones, we use the word sleet, as we explained earlier, snow. We talked about snowflakes. Blizzard is a snowstorm. So if it is a snowstorm, we call it a blizzard. Usually you have a blizzard on high altitudes. If you are a mountaineer and trying to go to the base camp of K2, you might encounter some blizzards. Okay, for temperature we use the word hot, warm, cold, cool, cold and freezing. We've already looked at it, so I'm going to skip it and move on to the next one, which is clouds. Well, it could be cloudy or it could be gloomy. Gloomy actually means that it is grayish, not bright. Gloomy could also be referred to our moods. If our mood is not bright, we say he is gloomy. But we say that today it's gloomy. That means today the sky is not clear. Foggy, because of the clouds. Sometimes clouds, they come down and therefore it is really very foggy. Sometimes these are not really clouds, but water vapors are so many that it becomes foggy. Overcast means almost similar like cloudy, and clear is when it is sunny. Well, there are different kinds of winds. We have talked about hurricane earlier. Gale is very powerful storm. Breeze is a cool wind that blows either in the morning, which is comfortable, not very powerful. Whereas blustery is really very powerful. Gale is like a storm, windstorm, and hurricane is like a twister that goes round and round. And you can also use other vocabulary which is related to weather, like forecast. When you predict weather, when you tell what will the weather be like in future, it is called a forecast. Drought. Drought is a dry season for a long period of time. When there are no rains for many, many months, it causes drought. We've talked about lightning, thunder and rainbow already, so I'm going to skip these. Okay, asking about weather. Well, there are different ways of asking about the weather, but one question that we've already discussed is what's the weather like today? So look at the phrase here. What's the weather like today? And what does this question mean? It means the same as how is the weather today. If I ask what's the weather like today, I am asking to describe the weather. So if you want someone to describe the weather to you, you can say what's the weather like today, or what's the weather like, what was the weather like yesterday, or what will the weather be like tomorrow. Okay, so it's asking the same as how is the weather today. Okay, now here are some situations, and I would like you to look at these situations and try to answer the question that I'm going to ask you. What's the weather like today? It's, yeah, if you said it's misty, it's foggy, you are right. In fact, you can use three words. You can say it's hazy, it's misty, it's foggy. There is a difference. Basically, all these words, they mean that there is very little visibility. But hazy is because of, it could be because of the heat. Foggy is because of the cold. And misty could be because of the dust or smoke. Well, sometimes we also use the word smoggy from smog. And smog is really an interesting word because it is a mixture of two English words, which is smoke and fog. So when smoke and fog mix together, it is called smog. If you live next to an industrial area, highly industrialized area, you would find that in winter, thick fog, it mixes with the smoke of these factory emissions, the smoke that these factories emit. They mix together and it becomes a smog. S-M-O-G, smog. So there are different words that you can use. Basically it's foggy, but there are some other words that are related here. It could be hazy, it could be misty, or it could be smoggy. जी वापस आते हैं. And let's look at the next picture. What's the weather like today? Great. It is rainy. It's raining or it's rainy. Great. Let's move on. What's the weather like today? It is humid. It's hot and humid. You know, this man is sweating. Okay, this is, you see that his shirt is wet, and it's wet because of sweat. And he is sweating because the weather is hot and humid. This kind of weather we have like in July or August. Usually we have this kind of weather. Okay, what's the weather like today? Yeah, it's snowy. So you can see that there are some snowflakes here. Right, these are not hailstones, these are snowflakes, because these snowflakes are soft, whereas hails are very hard. Okay, so it's snowing. After it has snowed, we say that the land is frosty, hard frost. Okay, but when it is snowing, these are called snow. You know the difference between ice and snow? In refrigerator we make ice, whereas the natural one is called snow. Okay. But once snow has fallen down, it is called a frost, or sometimes you can also call it ice. So you have, for example, you play ice hockey. Okay. All right, what's the weather like today? Yeah, you're right, it's windy. What's the weather like today? Okay, there are hailstones, or it's hailing. As you can see that this time it's not soft. These are hard hails, and therefore they are also called hailstones. Okay, what's the weather like today? The weather has cleared after rain, and rainbow has appeared. In the distance here, you can see that a rainbow has appeared here. Okay, what's the weather like today? There is thunder and lightning. Okay, you can see lightning here. So it's stormy tonight. There is thunder and lightning. Okay, what's the weather like today? Very often we have this kind of weather, so you know it very well. It is hot and dry. It is really very hot. Or you can say it is scorching hot. And the temperature sometimes rises above 40. All right, so these were few prompts, and now we move on to some listening task. You are going to listen to this weather forecast, and while you listen to it, you are going to answer the following questions. The first question is, who's presenting the weather? Who's presenting the weather? And second question is, which country is this weather forecast about? Apart from these two questions, I also want you to make notice of other things, and once you have listened to it, I'll show you the transcription. I'll show you the script, and we will analyze it for various purposes, for grammar and for vocabulary. Okay, so are you ready now to listen to this weather forecast? Great. here it is.
Delighted to say we've got a new member of our weather team tonight. Let me hand over to him now. Your Highness.
Well, it's an unsettled picture as we head towards the end of the week. This afternoon it'll be cold, wet and windy across most of Scotland. We're under the influence of low pressure, and this weather front pushing northwards is bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain. The rain, of course, will be heaviest over the borders and around Edinburgh, where it could lead to difficult conditions on the roads. In the west, rain will be lighter and patchier. There will maybe a few drier interludes over Dumfries House in Ayrshire. Aha! There'll be snow for the higher ground of the Highlands and Aberdeenshire. The potential for a few flurries over Balmoral, who the hell wrote this script, as the afternoon goes on. The best of the drier and brighter weather will, of course, be over the Northern Isles and the far north of the mainland. So a little hazy sunshine to the Castle of May and Caithness, but a cold day everywhere with temperatures of just 8 Celsius and a brisk northeasterly wind. Thank God it isn't a bank holiday.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this little weather forecast. It was funny, wasn't it? So can you answer the following questions now? Do you know who was presenting the weather? Well, it was Prince Charles. Okay, and which country is this weather forecast about? It's about Scotland. Well, Prince Charles was visiting BBC, and he became a weatherman, and he just read out the script that is usually read by the weatherman. So this became a big news because he is, of course, a big celebrity. He is a royalty, and therefore it became a big news and it became viral. People all over the world, they started watching this news because it was presented by Prince Charles. Okay, great. Okay, here is the script of what you just listened to. I'm not going to read out the complete, but I want you to look at these bold type words, the words that are written in bold, and I want you to think about their meaning. So what you need to do here is you can pause this lecture here, or you can go back and you can listen to the video again, and then you can read it out. Okay. Once you have read it, I want you to look at the meaning of these words. Now let's look at these words one by one and see if you can, if your meanings match with the ones that I have written here. Unsettled mean unchangeable. Sorry. Unsettled mean changeable, not permanent. They are changeable. The weather will be changing a lot. It's unsettled is like unpredictable, and it is changing all the times, just like the weather of Karachi, I think. In Karachi, the weather changes quite dramatically and suddenly. So the weather is sometimes good, sometimes bad. It is unsettled. So it's not permanent, it is not unchanging, it is changeable. Under the influence means we are experiencing or we are having. So if we say we are under the influence of bad weather, this means we are experiencing bad weather. If we say we are under the influence of a heavy storm, it means we are having a heavy storm. Weather front means a body of weather. We can also say cold front or warm front. Okay. Outbreaks of rain that starts suddenly. Outbreak is something when something spreads or starts suddenly. Like you can have outbreaks of famine. कहत जब पड़ता है तो उसको कहते हैं famine. Outbreak of famine, or suddenly war breaks out. Okay. Similarly, outbreaks of rain means when rain suddenly starts, unexpectedly starts, usually not for a long time. And it is outbreaks of rain means showers, right? So the rain suddenly starts and it's not for a long period of time. Difficult conditions on the roads was probably the easiest of all these phrases, and it means not easy to drive because of the amount of water. Okay, because the roads or the streets are flooded and it's not easy to drive. Patchier is from patch, small bursts of rain only in some areas, in some patches. Okay, so patch is a spot, a particular area. So patchier means that the rain is falling only in particular areas, not in all areas. Drier interludes means small periods of time without rain. Interludes means periods of time, stretch of time, and drier means dry, without rain. Flurries means short periods of rain in windy conditions. So when it is windy and along with the wind we have short period of rain, it is called a flurry. And the plural of flurry is flurries. Hazy sunshine, sunshine that is not 100%. Okay, so hazy, as we learned earlier, like misty, because there is less visibility, this means it is not completely clear. So the conditions are unclear. So hazy sunshine is when sunshine is not 100%. And of course it is difficult to describe this phrase, but in the context I think you do get the meaning. Brisk means fast and strong. Okay, if for example you say the weather is brisk, this means that the weather is fast and it is strong. The wind is blowing fast and the weather is strong. Okay, so this is some weather forecast vocabulary. You can, after learning this vocabulary, I think you can listen to the video once again, and this time it will make more sense to you. Now we move on and let's look at the grammatical aspects of the same script. And this time you see we have the same two paragraphs, but this time there are few places that I have written in red or typed in red, and we have got some words that are bold type. Let's look at the red words first. And if you see, what tense is it? It is future simple tense. It will be cold. Short form of will is it'll. It'll be cold. It'll be cold means it will be cold. So you see, it'll be cold, the rain will be heaviest, there will be a few drier interludes, there will be snow, and weather will of course be over the Northern Isles. You see here, in all these situations, in the script writer, he has used will. And why has he done that? Because he has predicted it. He has predicted the weather. It is a weather forecast. So when we talk about weather forecast, when we predict it, we don't use is going to or it is raining tomorrow. We don't say that because it is not scheduled. We don't say it is going to rain. We say it is going to rain when we are making predictions suddenly. But if we say it will rain, then we are making a forecast. Okay? So normally in forecasts and in predictions, we use present simple tense, future simple tense. Now the second thing that I want you to look at is this bold type, the words that are written in bold type. These bold type words are adjectives, but we have used different degrees of adjectives. You know, a positive adjective like dry has 2 degrees. You can say comparative degree and superlative degree. So you say dry, drier, driest, fast, faster, fastest. So usually you add ER and EST along with the adjectives in order to make the comparative and the superlative degrees of adjectives, like slow, slower, slowest, fast, faster, fastest, cheap, cheaper, cheapest. But not always. Sometimes instead of ER and EST, we use more and most before these adjectives. So if it is expensive, for example, we say more expensive, the most expensive. Beautiful, more beautiful, most beautiful. And similarly, sometimes we have degrees that are irregular. So it doesn't use ER and EST format, neither does it use more and most format. Instead, we use irregular formats. For example, we say good, better, best, less, lesser, least, bad, worse, worst. Okay, we can say far, farther, farthest, but we can also say far, farther, further, furthest. Both are okay. All right, now here we have degrees of adjectives, and you see this: drier, lighter, patchier, higher, drier and brighter. All these are in comparative forms, and whereas heaviest and this and the best, these two are the superlative degrees. You know, we use the comparative form of adjective when we are comparing 2 things. So we say this book is heavier than that book, or Aslam is taller than Amjad. Okay, but we use the superlative degree when we are talking about the best among many. For example, we say Ali is the most intelligent student in the class, or Fatima is the most hard-working student in the class. So now you should try to understand this by paying attention to these comparative and superlative degrees of adjectives. Okay. In fact, if you go back now, you can look at these pictures once again, and you can see, suppose that this is how the weather was like yesterday. So you can say yesterday it was foggy, but today it is rainy. Okay. Yesterday it was humid, but today it is snowing. Usually it doesn't happen, but anyway, you can make comparisons this way. And you can say that the rain is falling faster now. Okay, so you can use these comparative and superlative degrees of adjectives, and that should help you narrate it. Okay, we move on. Now that you have listened to a weather forecast, can you just look at this map of Pakistan and try to give a weather forecast? Okay, can you try that? First of all, look at these symbols. Okay, so you'll see if you have the sun, it is clear day. Okay, if you have the sun, this symbol, it means that it is sunny, or it is the day is clear. Okay, if you have this symbol, it means that it is partially cloudy, partly cloudy. And if you have this one, this means that it is cloudy. Okay, and if you have these drops here, this means that it is rainy. It will rain. Okay, so now give it a try. All right, and if you can see, mainly it is sunny in Punjab. In Punjab, it is mainly sunny, whereas in Kashmir and in you can say in Kashmir and northern areas, upper northern areas, it might rain. It is cloudy, and it is expected, heavy rain is expected there. But in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it is partly cloudy. Most of the cities in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it is partly cloudy. Whereas in Sindh, in some parts it is sunny, whereas in other parts it is partly cloudy. Okay, so you can say that in Karachi it is partly cloudy, for example. Okay, whereas in Balochistan it is mainly rainy, and at some places it will be partly cloudy. So this is how you can present the weather forecast. It will be interesting if you try to record your own weather report or weather forecast after displaying this. You can also talk about temperatures, the minimum temperature and the highest temperature, and you can also talk about other conditions like wind, etc., to make your weather forecast more interesting. And it will be interesting if you record it. These days you see you have voice recorders in audio recorders in your mobile phones as well. So it will be pretty interesting if you try to record your own weather forecast in English and try to and make your colleagues listen to it. And it will be interesting if you have some of your class fellows with whom you can swap these audio files, or you can exchange these audio files. So by this I mean that your class fellows can listen to your weather forecast and you can listen to their weather forecast. Okay, now talking about weather is very common in English. And in fact, if you don't have anything else to talk about, usually with the strangers, with the foreigners, it is always safe to start your conversation with the weather. English people are usually considered to be very conservative, and when they are traveling in the metro, traveling in the bus, traveling by train, or even in flying, they usually don't talk much. They like to read their own little books that they are carrying with them. But you may talk to them about the weather. You might say, "It's sunny today. Isn't it a bit cold today? Isn't it a bit hot today? It's really terrible today. The weather is really terrible today. Do you expect it will rain tomorrow? Do you think it will get any better this evening?" Okay, so these are few questions that you can ask in order to strike a conversation. But usually if the foreigners are here, you can also ask other questions, such as what's the weather like in your country, or what's the weather like over there. And by over there it means in your country, in your native country? Or how is the weather different from here? How is the weather different from here? So very often this dialogue doesn't end here. The foreigners would probably tell you what kind of weather they are experiencing in Pakistan and how their weather is different. They will probably use the comparative degrees. They would say, no, it is colder in their country, or it is warmer in their country, or it snows more frequently in their country than it does in Pakistan. Okay, now I want you to practice weather vocabulary, and for that what you can do is you can get lots of pictures. You can look at pictures taken from newspapers, magazines of different kinds of seasons and weathers, and then you can make statements about it. The best thing is that you try to compare two different weathers by using the comparative form. So you can say, or maybe you can compare two cities, the weather in two cities. For example, if I ask you to compare the weather of Multan with the weather of Sawat, how would you compare it? The weather in Sawat is much colder than in Multan. Okay, it is much windier in Multan than in Sawat. Okay, it rains more often in Sawat than in Multan. Okay, the dust storm is more frequent in Multan than in Sawat. So what your task is, take two pictures of different showing different weathers, or think of two cities whose weather is a complete contrast, whose weather is very different from each other, and then try to compare it. First, try to compare it orally by giving the description, and then try to compare it in a written form. And when you compare it, you should use the comparative degrees of adjectives, and you should use all the weather vocabulary that you have learnt today. And I would also like you to make a phrase book or a notebook, and in that notebook you can note down all the relevant vocabulary items, the lexical items, either in terms of phrases or single words. And you should try your best to use these in future. Whenever you talk about weather, you should actually include a variety of phrases and sentences so that you sound interesting and you communicate more effectively and you become a proficient speaker. Okay, with this we come to the end of lecture number 25, and now I want you to look at the summary of what we learned in lecture number 25. In lecture number 25, you learned how to listen to and comprehend weather reports. Actually, you just listened to one weather report by Prince Charles, and I hope you understand it now. You also learned how to use weather-related words and phrases. Okay. Then you learned the use of comparative and superlative degrees of adjectives. You learned how we use will when we are making a forecast or when we are predicting something. And finally, you learned how to describe weather in your own words, orally or in written form. So this is what we learned in lecture number 25. Hope it will be as informative and useful as the earlier lectures have been, and hope to see you again with the next lecture. Thank you very much.